It's that sound, which means it's another week of high school football in North Georgia. Hello, everyone. Welcome into the North Georgia Sports Report podcast. I'm your host, Will Cooper, joined alongside my co host, my good friend, longtime broadcast partner. You know him, you love him. That is Art Mosley. Art, how are you doing, my friend?
I couldn't be better. And I have to tell you, man, you bring me in with such great accolades. Last week you called me the man, the myth, the legend. This week you told people that they know me and they love me. Um, I tell you what, we might need to take a poll on that after some of the takes I've had this season, and maybe some of the takes I'm going to have today. Maybe I won't be as beloved and as welcomed in certain circles. But anyway, Coop, I'm doing great on this Tuesday night. It's been kind of a whirlwind of a weekend. I'll go ahead and say we got a chance to kind of hang out a little bit together. Not the greatest of circumstances, but we made the best of it, and it's great to hang out with you and a couple other friends on Saturday, and some great high school football this past weekend, and we got some big matchups coming up that we're going to talk about. I can't wait to get into it. And of course, some coach interviews as always, Coop. The best part of the show, in my
Absolutely.
opinion.
Yeah, they get tired of hearing us. I know they're really just here for the coaches' interviews, so we just fill it. We just fill it in case you want some background noise for a while. But it was definitely good to see you too, my friend. I appreciate every Patience fan out there for the week. Obviously, we didn't get the podcast up when we wanted to. That's on me. It was a long week. I'll leave it at that. But very much appreciated getting to come back home and see everybody and getting to hang out with you guys. So excited for another week of high school football getting back on track this week. And Art, if you are ready, my friend, I'm ready to jump into this thing.
Let's jump into it, Coop. Our first game that we're going to talk about, it always, for us, it starts and ends, or starts, I'm not, not ends, it starts with the Cherokee Warriors. Coop, Cherokee again putting up an absolute ton of points on offense. A big game from Jack Rubin. Once again, you know, we saw them put up points, 43 points, a season high for them this season. Alternatively, though, I was wrong, and I think the Cooper predictor was right, because this game was extremely high scoring. We're talking about over 100 points, 102 points. I mentioned Rubin, the usual suspects, Hamilton as well, kind of getting it done there. But man, oh man, 59-43. North Paulding wins this game by 16. And tell you what, the Warriors have found a way to put up points on the board, but they got to find a way to stop teams. And we thought this North Paulding team was pretty powerful coming into this game, and they put plenty of points on the board to prove that point.
Yeah, they did, and they're just Cherokee's offense is being super efficient right now. 20 of 30 passing for Zach Parker, 306 yards, 2 touchdowns, only 1 pick. Brandon Hamilton continues his good work, 15 carries, 237 yards. Okay, that's one thing that I've kind of looked at a lot this year is the production and what kind of average you have on your carries, on your, completions, on your throws. That's such a big part of offense is getting those big plays. And right now, Brandon Hamilton is doing a heck of a job. Again, 15 carries, 237 yards. I didn't do the math, but I know it's well over 10 yards carry. And then Jack Rubin as well, continuing his good work, having some really good back-to-back weeks, 11 grabs, 181 yards and a touchdown as well. It's just kind of like you mentioned, giving up 59 points, again, giving up 50 plus. It's really tough to win a football game that way.
Yeah, those are track meets, Coop. North Paulding, your North Paulding rushed for 328 yards in the game, threw for a little over 120. So as you mentioned, with those stats, game going back and forth, it's almost like you're playing ping pong there, and you got to find a way to limit the opposition in its own right. Cherokee, as you mentioned, putting up Coop, if my math is right, 575 yards of offense. Is that if I can do
About right.
math? 306 yards through the air, 269 on the ground. I mean, a absolute highlight reel for some of these players on Friday night. But as you mentioned, Will, when you give up that many points, it's going to be tough sledding to stop somebody. and we'll talk about this. We'll probably spend a little bit more time on this next week on the podcast. But um, right now we're looking at region play, and this thing might be up for grabs. Where you have a North Cobb team that seems to be rounding into form. North Paulding had a big week last week, but Cherokee proving that they can score with the best of them. And they are not out of this region. I know it's their first region loss, but there's a little setback. But I think in region play, they're still set up very well. Uh, there's going to be two teams that, that we'll be scratching our head at, I suppose, at the end of the season, saying maybe we missed that one. But I think that we look at North Cobb, prohibitive favorite. But you've got North Paulding, Marietta, Etowah, Walton, Cherokee themselves, and Wheeler kind of in a dogfight for those last three spots, and it's anybody's ball game at this point still, with one region game played, and then of course Etowah has not played a region game yet. But Cherokee on a bye this week. Coop. They'll come back next week and face region rival and county rival Etowah. But what do you think they're working on this week on the bye?
It's got to be defense. I mean, the offense is putting up again incredible numbers. On your completions last week, you averaged 15 yards per completion, over 10 yards per attempt. On the ground, again, well over 10 yards per carry. The efficiency is there. The scoring is there. Anytime you can put up, really about 30 plus, that you should win 90% of those football games. So defensively, that's where the Warriors are going to have to kind of scratch and claw and find something, whether it's schematically, whether it's personnel wise, whatever it is, but they got to find a way to keep some of these teams from hitting that 50-point mark, because it does just put yourself at such a disadvantage. Or even when your offense is putting up numbers that deserve to be shouted from the mountaintops, we're not able to do so just because we're kind of harboring over that defensive side of the ball. So got to find a way to improve that in this bye week. I think it can be very helpful for the Warriors. And kind of like you mentioned, North Paulding and North Cobb to me are probably the two best teams in the region. So you got one of those games out of the way. But Cherokee against Wheeler, Cherokee against Etowah, Cherokee against even Walton right now, you know, are they head and shoulders above the Warriors? Absolutely not. So I think that that's wide open for them. Like we said, you can live with a loss or two in that region because it's such a small region. You get the third seed or fourth seed, qualify for the playoffs. That'll work out just fine. So, the Warriors are a big question mark for me. I think out of all the teams that we've seen play, that is the biggest question mark, is what Cherokee can do week in, week out. And it mostly comes from the defensive side of the football.
Tell you what, it's nice to see them put a lot of points on the board. We'll see them get that defense fixed, and we'll talk about the Warriors. We'll talk about and hopefully to the Warriors next week in next week's podcast. Excuse me. For now, we're going to move on to. We're going to go out of alphabetical order because some of the matchups that we have this week, but we're going to move on to Etowah, a team that Cherokee will face coming off of the bye week. The Etowah Eagles had a bye week last week. We recapped their game last week just real quickly for folks that did not know. Etowah winners 31-12 over Chapel Hill in their last game. This week, they'll travel to Northcutt Stadium to face the Marietta Blue Devils. Coop, what can you tell us about Etowah? And or do you want me to tell you about Marietta before you tell me about Etowah?
I think I can tell you about Etowah first, and then I'll let you tell me about the Blue Devils over there.
Fair enough.
So yeah, I mean for Etowah, kind of looking back at some of the stats that they put up over the first four games before heading into this bye week, I think the thing that stands out to me is that running back room really got going last game against Chapel Hill, right? Mike Goins, Drake Mason, those were a couple of guys that really kind of solidified themselves. Goins with over 100 yards, Drake Mason with the 2 touchdown carries against Chapel Hill. I think that was the last piece that they needed on offense. That really kind of puts them in that next level, right? And I think that with continuing progression of Zeke Douglas, again with his targets, going to Walker Hughes, I think that offense is very dynamic. I think that's a great offense, arguably one of the better in the region right now, at least without seeing any region action, right? And then I think the other question would be for Etowah is, defensively, they continue to put up great numbers. Cooper Hendricks, again, 5 sacks through 4 games. They're just doing a lot of things right now on defense. So Etowah to me is a team, and I know people have kind of gotten on me for my power rankings about keeping them at 4. That's mostly because of the dichotomy in their record. Beating a good Woodstock team, that win now looks better from them beating River Ridge, did the Wolverines a couple of weeks ago, but also beating Chapel Hill. My question is, and I'm sure you'll tell me about this in just a second, but seeing them play those top classification teams, top 2 in Sprayberry, and then coming up and following against Campbell, where do they line up in that competition in the region? Because they're going to face a Marietta team that is 1-4, but their losses are to Gainesville, West Forsyth, McEachern, and Hillgrove, and they beat Wheeler by 31 points last week. So they're a very impressive team for their record's sake. So I think that's why I have the big question mark, right? They're kind of at 4 with that question of, what are we doing? Where do they line up? So I think that'll be something we'll kind of get a clearer picture on this week. But I do like where Etowah's at a lot, and I don't think that this game against Marietta is the one you have to hang your hat on. I think regardless of the outcome, there's still things to look forward to. But I do think they have a fair shot against the Blue Devils. But before I give anything else, I will defer to you so you can tell me all about the Marietta Blue Devils, so I have a better idea of what I'm saying.
Big Blue, Marietta. Okay, so they'll be at home, as you mentioned, Coop. A team that has struggled a little bit early, got their first win of the season against Wheeler and really blew out the Wildcats in that ball game. Season highs last week: 298 yards passing and 216 yards rushing. That was what I was trying to get to. Quarterback Jaden Whiteside had a big game. He's thrown for 567 yards and 3 touchdowns, but he has also thrown 4 picks. On the ground, you've got Titus Grant and Landon Mannery. Grant with 165 yards and 6 touchdowns, Mannery with 176 yards and a touchdown. And then outside on the perimeter, you've got Samaj Anderson and Isaac Copeland. Those guys have together combined for 28 catches and 341 yards. They're tops on the team. Coop, Marietta is allowing 25.6 points per game. You did mention who their opposition was, so take that into consideration. Looking at them defensively, Jameen Solomon leading the team with 35 total tackles, and then Merrick Ham, a sophomore, if I'm not mistaken, 7.5 tackles for loss, a team high 4 sacks. Marietta has only forced 4 turnovers this season. So, then I take a look at Etowah and I'm like, all right, like you said, where do we stand? There's a lot of question marks here to me for this Marietta team. What's their identity? Going 0-4 to start. You got a new head coach, Cameron Duke, taking over this program. And the 52 points came out of nowhere. Their previous games, Marietta, 7 against Gainesville, 17 against West Forsyth, 13 against McEachern. And again, they battled McEachern tightly. That's a rivalry game, I understand, but 13-16, it was the final. And then Hillgrove comes back, another kind of, rivalry game, but Hillgrove dominates Marietta 34-6. And then there's Wheeler. You go up 52-21. Wheeler fell, just for record's sake, they got beat by North Forsyth by 4 to begin the season. Then Harrison got them by 28. They beat North Atlanta by 1, which looks like a pretty good win. Lost to Kell by 14. And so, a lot of question marks here with some of these results. And if I'm looking at this ball game, I think high scoring. I think this is what you asked me what I think about Etowah's chances a little bit. And I think because they can score similar to what we talked about with Cherokee, they're going to be in any ball game. And I think their defense is probably Etowah's defense right now is a tick better than Cherokee's. And some of that might be competition. I don't know. But the numbers right now say that Etowah is a tick better. I think this game is one that goes down to the wire, Coop. I question whether or not Etowah will have any ring rust from being off last week. And Marietta, will they kind of be riding high on the hog? So a lot of other things come to factor. I do think this is an important game for both teams because I think that they're vying for that 3-4 spot, and neither one can really afford to slip up. Marietta certainly having one win down already, is a nice feather in their cap. And Coop, I think they find a way with the ground game to get it done this week, and I think it's close. I don't think it's a blowout. And if you give me just a second here, I'll let you know. It's I think last second touchdown for Marietta gives them the win by 7 points over our Etowah Eagles.
Yeah, I'll go on the opposite side of the pick with you. I'm going to take Etowah on this one because I want to address a couple things there. Saying that Etowah's defense is a tick better than Cherokee, I'm going to say they're a couple of steps ahead of Cherokee's defense. Yes, some of that is competition. Again, I understand they gave up 42 to Sprayberry. That being said, I don't look at this Etowah team as being outclassed. I think this is a hard game to guess at, and we haven't run the Cooper predictor for the week. Again, kind of operating on a short week here, but we'll run it before Friday, and I'll tweet out my predictions for everyone. But just kind of looking at the results, th- okay, that's they lost 4 games. We mentioned who it was to: Gainesville, West Forsyth, McEachern, Hillgrove, as you broke down. Etowah's 2 losses are to Campbell and Sprayberry. Okay. I don't know how you differentiate one or the other. Yes, Marietta has a tougher strength of schedule in their resume so far, but there's a reason they're 1-4. So, with that being said, I like the Eagles in this one. I do think it depends on the clean consistency of Zeke Douglas. I think that's going to be the key, making sure that he's off the board with interceptions, hitting the targets he needs to, and hopefully getting some help in the running game, whether it is Drake Mason, Mike Goins, whoever it is, but getting some help there will be a key to this one. But I do like Etowah by a field goal.
All right. We both had this at 1-score games in the opposite direction, but Coop, I like it. I like a little, I don't want to call it controversy, but a little differentiation here.
There you go. Nothing wrong with that.
Fair enough. We're going to move on. And Coop, because we have our next 2 games that we're going to preview feature in county matchups here. We'll start with Creekview. We'll talk about their game a little bit from last week, and then we'll work to Woodstock, talk about their game. Then we'll talk about their matchup upcoming. So the Creekview Grizzlies winners over the Riverwood Raiders. Creekview. I got off to a slow start. I guess that's the best way to put it. 35-7, 28-point win. The game ended kind of how I felt it might in the margin of victory, but maybe a little bit too close for comfort early on. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I thought, Cooper Predictor had this one pegged as a 24-7 win for Creekview. I thought it probably went as expected. I agree with your sentiment from kind of score watching on Friday evening of saying, okay, it's 7-7 and it's 7-14. They're hanging around for a while here. Look out. But Creekview did what better teams do. I think Creekview has more talent than Riverwood does, and that shows really in the fourth quarter. And obviously, Creekview's strength program has a big part of that as well. They're one of the best in the region and really the area, and have been for a while. That continues under Coach Williams over there. So, not surprised that they were able to pull away late. One thing that I've said repeatedly, and I have to give you flowers for it, is Alex Penrod at quarterback, 9 of 15, 128 yards, 3 touchdowns. I've been begging for passing efficiency from the Grizzlies since week 1, begging for it, and it showed up in a big way, right? 3 touchdowns through the air. Love it. Not to be outdone, he also had 14 carries for 83 yards and a touchdown as well. And then Carson Lott continues his good work, 19 carries, 153 yards. It's about 6 yards per carry, just a touch over that. And then Jackson Shirley had a really good game, who was somebody that Coach Williams had mentioned to us way back in the preseason show. 3 grabs, 75 yards, and 2 touchdowns as well. Incredibly efficient on the offensive side of the ball. Creekview's defense is good enough to keep these teams like Riverwood, kind of talking about Lassiter, Pope, kind of that group. Because I think when you talk about Cherokee County, I think for at least for us, we think that Pope, Lassiter, Riverwood are kind of, on the floor level, however you want to organize those teams in your rankings. And then Creekview, River Ridge, Woodstock are all in a group. And then Sprayberry, and then obviously Sequoyah at the top of that in terms of just, favorability and on a neutral site. So I wasn't surprised by the outcome. I was kind of surprised by the slow start, but they did end up turning it on late. So for Creekview, I say continue it, man. You know, this is the second game they've scored over 35 points. If you can continue to do that, I think Creekview's defense is plenty good enough to keep you in pretty much any ball game that you can put 30 plus points up. So I liked what I saw from Creekview.
Yeah, Coop. As you mentioned, we saw that slow start, and we were kind of texting back and forth throughout our respective Friday evenings, and uh, with very curious eyes watching that football game. But you mentioned Penrod. Uh, we know that Coach Williams talked about Penrod last week also, and his dynamic playmaking ability, and you already alluded to that when you threw out the stats. So good win by Creekview, and again, their defense continues to be a high point. While the offense figures it out, their defense is, I think, really been a shining star, and a lot of that, we talk about Russell and Hanson and Austin Penrod on the back end, but a lot of that is kind of just a no name effort. And when I say no name, it's just kind of a blue collar lunch pail type group where they're there's not a superstar on that defense right now. I don't think, I don't think it matters to them. I think they're finding ways to get it done week in and week out, and that's a credit to Coach Williams and his coaching staff over there.
Yeah, it is. And when you talk about defense anyway, you really would rather not have a superstar in the bunch. You would rather everybody in all levels be good. Offensively, that's not necessarily the case. You do want a game-breaking receiver. You want a game-breaking running back. You want the quarterback that's this or that. So for the defense, if we're not talking about a specific defensive lineman and they're getting pressure, that's a good thing because that means you can't key in on it. If we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about the secondary and there's nobody that is standing out to you in terms of, pass defends or interceptions or targets, that's good. That means that you can't just not throw to that side of the field because the other corner and safety on the other side of the field aren't as good. So that's typically what you want in a defense. So I think that plays into kind of Creekview's MO as well. We obviously know from their history they do have guys that have come up and been those great guys. You can go all the way back to Cale Williams, Andy Davis, right? I mean, just run down the list of safeties that have been through there. Isaac Hubert, how many great linebackers of Brant Freeman and all these guys. My point is though, is that even on those teams, you didn't avoid them because the rest of the defense was really good. So I don't take, hopefully Creekview fans don't take that as a slight because I don't think it is. I think it's probably ideal. The thing for me for Creekview is that they're finally starting to develop some guys that we should know their names, right? Like Carson Lott's come on really strong since Region Play started. That's good. And the efficiency has been really good. Jackson Shirley picking up in the receiving game, because that was kind of what we were coming in saying, all right, you got Derek Mizak, playing the tight end position. We feel really good about him, but they graduated a lot last year in that receiving core, a couple of transfers. Where are they going to go from there? And seeing some names pick up there is a good thing too. So for Creekview, please don't take it as a slight. I don't think it is. I think it's really probably a good thing that we're just learning, what the offense has to show, but the defense continues their good work of just as a unit collectively doing a good job.
Absolutely. Coop, let's take a look at their opponent this week. Let's review the Woodstock Wolverines. Now, you called this as a potential trap game for Woodstock a week ago. And tell you what, as scores were coming across the wire, it looked to be that way. I don't know if that game was really ever in doubt. I think we just expected a wider margin of victory from the Wolverines last week. They were able to win, but 10-point margin of victory, 31-21. One of two things: either they were looking ahead off to a slow start after that big win over River Ridge a week before, or maybe Lassiter is a little bit better than we give them credit for, or maybe it's a little bit of both.
I think it's both. I think Lassiter showed that they're capable of scoring points in bunches like they did against Creekview. Again, we just got done talking about how good their defense has performed and really since region play started. That is also a nod to Lassiter scoring 30 against that Creekview defense. But also at the same time, the reason I called it a trap game last week and pat myself on the head for that one, but the big thing for it is that you come off of that big win against River Ridge and you played a lot of home games. They played North Springs at home, they played Woodland Cartersville at home, and their really road trip up to that point had been against Etowah. And that's, it is a road game, but two minutes from where you're playing football anyway, and everybody travels well. So that's kind of why I called it. It's just going into that game, it just felt weird like knowing that you beat a team that you hadn't beaten a long time and had kind of dominated that series. And yeah, and then you got to go to Lassiter, and that's a pretty long trip. And Lassiter's kind of a team that, for us in the pundit world, we don't get super amped up about talking. It just felt weird to me. So that's why I called it that. 10-point margin of victory. You can say they overperformed, underperformed. That's entirely up to you. The Cooper predictor had this one going 41-28, so wasn't that far off. Just a little bit low scoring than we thought it might be. But with that being said, Burmeister continues his good work. 25 of 39 through the air, 259 yards, 2 touchdowns, 18 carries, 78 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then again, Rylan Hubbard, a name to know, right? 14 grabs, 158 yards, and a touchdown as well. That offense continues to find their footing, I think is kind of what we've seen from week to week. Because obviously after the loss to Etowah, they put up 31 points. How mad can you be at that? But then they put up 30, in the 30s against pretty much everybody. And then that Riverwood game was when they were facing what I would call an elite defense in 5A, considering what Riverwood had been able to keep teams from doing. Woodstock finds a way to win. I think they're continuing to flex a little bit on offense, finding their footing there. And that's going to be the intriguing matchup this week against Creekview, because it's Woodstock's offense versus Creekview's defense, I think, is kind of the key matchup.
Yeah, and Coop, as we move into this matchup, I'll go ahead and say I think it's strength on strength, and you nailed it on the head. Had Woodstock's offense versus Creekview's defense. Woodstock has been outright solid, or they were outright solid, at least through the air last week. I do want to mention, Burmeister with 78 yards rushing, but as a team, Woodstock held a 92 rush yards. Now, I don't necessarily think that's cause for concern for the Wolverines, but that's just a stat that kind of popped out to me on the year. Woodstock averaging 218 yards through the air, 172 yards, on the ground. And we know what Burmeister has done. He's been absolutely fantastic this season. Already over 1,000 yards passing, 1,044, 437 yards rushing. Total TDs, he's at 15. Just 4 interceptions. He's completing right around 65% of his passes. He's enigma is probably not the right word to describe him, but I tell you what, he's a one-man wrecking crew. And you mentioned Rylan Hubbard on the year, Coop, 41 receptions, 465 yards. The thing that concerns me if I'm Creekview in this game is not necessarily Burmeister's passing ability, but his ability to keep plays alive, almost similar to what we talk about Jaden Duckett. And I think a lot of the at least in region 6-5A, we talk about Duckett as kind of like the quarterback, the scrambler, the one with the most talent. But I think Burmeister is nipping on his heels, if not better uh, than Duckett. I think those guys are kind of right at the top in terms of quarterback play. And can Creekview get Burmeister to the ground? I think that's the most important thing. Um, and we've seen Xavier Murphy have a 100-yard rushing game. We've seen him out of the backfield. Can Creekview account for him and Burmeister at the same time, and cover Rylan Hubbard? That's the other thing. If Woodstock can give Burmeister a chance to look down the field and find Hubbard, I think it could be a long night for Creekview. And if Creekview can get pressure and not allow Burmeister to stand back there and pick his spots, then I think Woodstock's going to be in for a ball game.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are all great points, and I echo your sentiment that this maybe for Creekview is a heck of a precursor to what you're going to see later in the region with the likes of Duckett and even guys like Colby Martin that maybe not known for their running ability, but still able to extend plays. So and Hunter Lockerman at Riverridge as well. So for me, this is kind of Creekview's first test to get an idea of what we're going to see for the rest of their defense through region play. Woodstock, obviously, you're going to have to key in on Rylan Hubbard. Again, you mentioned his numbers on the year, again, going over, 150 yards last week. It's going to be key for them to slow him down. Woodstock's kind of rotated in a stable of backs as needed, whether it's Xavier Murphy. We've seen Trace Washington get some snaps in the running back position as well. So whatever the game calls for is kind of what that staff is going with. So that's kind of my overall perspective. I echo your sentiment. To me, I think you have to pick a magic number. I think for Woodstock, it's probably 28. think if you get to 28, if you're Woodstock, I would feel very comfortable about giving the Wolverines the win. And then from the Creekview perspective on offense, continuing the passing efficiency, I think, is key. Because, as great as Carson Lott has been, if you can key in on that, because, for all the things we kind of said about Lassiter, I don't think the run defense is that great.
Hmm.
And for Riverwood, I echo that, probably even higher. So I don't think that they've played two great running defenses maybe since they played Cambridge. So with that being said, I do think that Woodstock's run defense is pretty darn good. Ask Riveridge how good they are if you want to. So it is going to be up to the passing game of Creekview to alleviate some of that pressure from the running backs. So in that perspective, that's going to be the matchup for me. Can Creekview get to 28? That's the question. Because if Creekview gets to 28, I don't think Woodstock can score enough against Creekview's defense to match that. If they hold them under 28, then I think Woodstock can get to 28 and they'll be fine. So 28 is kind of my pivotal number in this one. I think that 4 touchdown mark is when you can decide who would probably win this football game.
If you're looking at history, 28 was enough last season for the Woodstock Wolverines to defeat Creekview on their homecoming. A name I would just want to mention for Woodstock. I know we talk a lot about their offense. We've talked about Tyler Howard. We talked about Danny Palmese, excuse me. Jabril Ba, defensive tackle, Coop. He's having an outstanding season, 8 tackles for loss and 5 sacks, leading the team in both categories. I think he can be a game wrecker for Woodstock's defense that Creekview will definitely need to take a serious look at how they're going to block this young fella along the defensive line. And one more kind of just a curious note. We know Carson Lott has been toting the rock for the Grizzlies. We have not seen Travis Vines in the last couple ball games. Very curious about that. But if Vines is available and healthy, he certainly makes this Creekview rushing attack a little more dynamic, even more so than it has been over the past couple of weeks. So, a couple of things to watch from my perspective, but I think it should be a fantastic ball game. It was a great ball game last season, and it should be just as good this week.
Yeah, agreed.
Oh,
I think this is.
I didn't give you a pick, did I?
You did not.
I was trying to get away from that. All that being said, I still like Woodstock by 13 this week.
Yeah, here's the thing. It's at the Woodshed, which makes me feel very good. Woodstock is 3-0 at the Woodshed. I feel like that'll probably continue. I have in previous years mentioned Creekview's two kind of branching realities of playing at the Den versus playing on the road. It's kind of hard to nail that down this year just because Creekview's only won a couple of games and it's, kind of getting a slow start and they're building up. But I do agree with you. I think this one's going to be a little bit closer, actually. I think that Woodstock's going to get away from this one maybe by a field goal. But I think
Okay.
this is going to
Wow.
be it's going to be a heck of a ball game. This may be one of the most competitive games in the region that we'll see all year. Because I for some reason in my mind, I always try and like envision the game. Like what can you see that scoreboard ending as? I just don't see it ending as a big crooked number for Woodstock. And even 13 is not out of the realm of possibility. But to me, it screams 24-27, something like that. Maybe 24-28. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. So I do go with you on Woodstock. I think they win this football game, but I do think it's close. So I give the Wolverines the home point advantage, that 3 point you get for being at home, and I'll give them the 3 point win.
All right, Coop, we're going to move on to our final game, our final two teams. But first, we're going to start with Sequoyah as a visitor. I know that's out of alphabetical order, but they're the visitor. So we're going to start with them first. And Coop, they had an interesting matchup on Friday night, and they exacted a measure of revenge on the Sprayberry Yellow Jackets. Wow, is probably the best the best way I can say that. I think it's a score that had most, that turned a lot of heads. Beat Sprayberry 63 to 20. The win catapults Sequoyah up firmly into the top 5 in most major publications and polls throughout the state. It was another dominant performance. As the I would say this as the old folks. Now I'm the old folks, but as they used to tell us, or we used to say, they beat Sprayberry like Sprayberry stole something from them, and left no doubt who currently is a top team in the region. Now we'll have a chance to talk to Coach Teter and hopefully a couple of guests along with him later on in the podcast coming up. But Coops, your thoughts first about Sequoyah and their victory on Friday night.
Yeah, I talked to Sheriff Reynolds and the staff over at the Cherokee County Sheriff's Office. They were pending some charges against Sequoyah for what they did to Cherokee. I do think that they were kind of waiting to see, and I think that they will go ahead and file those charges for abuse after what they did to Sprayberry this past week. Because it was a butt kicking for a while, man. I mean, it was physical domination is what I would call it. And we talked about this kind of in the podcast last week was, the style would make the fight. And it
Mm-hmm.
was Sprayberry who was going to kind of make things happen, throw the ball around the yard, and Sequoia was going to turn around and hand it off. And boy did they. I mean, Will Rejecki's obviously, getting the statewide / national attention this week, rightfully so. 27 carries, 250 yards, 7 touchdowns, just unreal. And he did not play much in the fourth quarter. So, that's kind of a narrowed down version of the workload. Jack Ripley continues his good work, 2 grabs, 32 yards and a touchdown off the arm of Colby Martin, who went 6 of 9, 150 yards and a touchdown. Again, we're talking about offensive efficiency. He completed 6 passes for 150 yards. That doesn't take a mathematician to tell you that's about 25 yards per completion. So, there's a lot to like about Sequoyah. I think what this game probably did was change the conversation from, is Sequoyah a really good North Georgia team? Are they really good in the region? Are they a field goal better than Sprayberry? Kind of like our picks were saying, maybe that one possession game. To now the question is, are they competitive in the state title conversation? Being in that top 5, which is where they belong, by the way. Their record certainly represents that. And here's the other thing for Sequoyah fans. You're not going to see Kell in a lot of the top 10 because they've lost to Sequoyah and then they went and lost to Lowndes last week. Kell is still a really good team in 4A. And then you have obviously what happened to Sprayberry. I know you dropped Sprayberry out of your top 10 because of that loss. Sprayberry got dropped to 10 in the Georgia High School Football Daily rankings after that loss. But that's not a reflection of their resume necessarily. That's more of, because they're, beating everyone very, very definitively, that it changes that dynamic for what teams, are thought of in their top 10 rankings. So with that being said, I think the conversation around Sequoyah has shifted more to the state level instead of the area or region conversation, more or less. And then also, wanted to give a quick shout out on defense again. Jedediah Marshall, known as Jay Marshall, pick 6 for him. And then Asa Goings and Bretton Darling also add another interception. But this is the second or the third game that Sequoyah has come away with, 3 interceptions in a game. I believe it's either second or third, but they look really good on both sides of the ball. Obviously, Sprayberry fans will say, well, Jaden Duckett looked a little bit injured in that game, but still, a 43-point win against one of the top teams in your classification will get the job done. So, again, Sequoyah doing Sequoyah things. It's just what the definition of Sequoyah things has probably changed a little bit from what it meant, 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, I'm nicknames. I'm writing my articles. I'm thinking, you know what? This is like a Sequoyah wrecking crew. Like they just wreck. Their defense finds a way to wreck any 5-star offensive player, and it is uncanny. All the talk coming in this game was a secondary for Sprayberry, and we understand that Sequoyah is not going to throw the ball 25, 30 times in a ball game. They threw the ball 9 times last week. But as you just mentioned, it was the Chiefs coming away with 3 picks defensively, and this is not. It's not like this was kind of a one-off deal. This is multiple games now that we've seen their defense make big plays. So we'll talk more about them in momentarily, but I do want to get to River Ridge, who will be playing the Chiefs, who will be hosting the Chiefs on Friday night. Coop, they had a bounce back win on Friday night, big win over the Pope Greyhounds, and we'll kind of get your thoughts on that as River Ridge gets to 1-1 in the region, a 31-point victory, 44-13. And, River Ridge getting back to business on the ground. Thoughts on that, Coop?
Yeah, I mean, I think the story of this game for me was efficiency. Once again, I'm going to keep harping on this because I think it's a key point that we got to hit. So, Hunter Lockerman, 4 of 5 for 158 yards. Okay, that's nearly 40 yards per completion, over 30 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns. Arden Redmond was the byproduct of that with 3 grabs, 136 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Again, that's well over 40 yards per catch. I mean, just crazy numbers. And then to your point, the running game steps back up, right? Micah Pugh, 9 carries, 108 yards. That's 12 yards per carry. Camden Cox, a little bit more of the bell cow in that game, 15 carries for 63 yards. But that's still a heck of an average as well. Averaging, just around that 4 to 5 yard mark per carry. Cox found the end zone as well. But I think River Ridge's offense, after having the disappointment that they did in the result against Woodstock, found the efficiency they needed. And I think that might be the key to River Ridge this year is that the efficiency is there. Now, obviously, we don't expect Lockerman to average 40 yards per completion. We don't expect Arden Redmond to average, 50 yards per reception, but we do expect, 10 yards per completion, 10 yards per attempt. Micah Pugh again continuing, with 12 yards per carry. Those kinds of things can make you very dangerous as a football team. And even in a game against Sequoyah, which we'll break down in a little bit, those are the kind of things that can keep you in a ball game, even against a team that's much higher rated than you.
Yeah, you're right, Coop. Almost kind of keeping a team off balance and capitalizing on every opportunity is what it looks like River Ridge got back to this week. You mentioned the numbers for Arden Redmond, just fantastic. This again, Micah Pugh leading the leader in the clubhouse. But we saw Pugh and Cox both take advantage of their carries in that victory, and they get back in the win column as we mentioned, sitting 1-1 in region play. But next up, it doesn't get any easier. I think that win is a great confidence builder and booster. Now you got to turn your sights to the 800-pound gorilla in the room, the Sequoyah Chiefs. And Coop, before we even get to this, and we've been covering this since high school football together here for the past 7-8 years. Have you? And even then, before I was covering high school football, just kind of being a casual or maybe more than casual observer, uh, your thoughts on where this, we talk about 2018, we had two great teams. We know that Etowah's made a run. Woodstock's made a run. Cherokee has had a couple of really good teams in the early mid 2000s. And without serving any disservice to teams that have come before, kind of in our coverage time, where do you rank this Sequoyah team in terms of top teams in the county?
They're up there. I mean, it's kind of hard to think about it because you got to think about how they're playing football right now. Maybe a little bit different than what we're used to seeing in 2018. If you lined up 2018 Sequoyah versus 2025 Sequoyah, how different are they in styles? They're very different. How would the coaching staffs compare? Right? There's a lot that goes into it, but just from the product you see on the field, right? Just from what you see, I would think that you probably got to put them up there with, that's always the debate is was 2018 Sequoyah the best? Was 2018 Creekview the best? Was 2020 River Ridge the best that we've seen in the 7-8 years that we've been doing this together? I would have said that it was probably 2020 River Ridge was the best team that we had seen. I would say they were probably a little bit ahead of where 2018 Creekview and 2018 Sequoyah were. So that's going to be the metric that I use. Um, I would say Sequoyah, 2025 Sequoyah, this iteration of Sequoyah is better than 2020 River Ridge. Now, that 2020 River Ridge team had some surprising results like this. I mean, who can forget when Rome came up to, the castle and tried to play River Ridge, and River Ridge, just kept doinking onside kicks off that poor kid's head, where they were able to get in some, steal some possessions, so to speak. But in terms of just across the board, I think the thing that works so well for Sequoyah is where their talent lies, right? Because how much better would Sequoyah be if they had a 4-star wide receiver? They would be better, sure, not arguing that. But the fact that both of your tackles are 3 stars, Will Rozecki's a 3-star, which he'll be a 4-star by the end of the year. That's not even a question to me. Um, your college talent, at least your FBS college talent, plays into each other. They're all looped together, right? I'll tell you a team that you could kind of draw a comparison to that didn't have it for a long time, and this will be a throwback. This will be testing your memory. But 2019 Cherokee had AJ Swan, Keith Adams Jr., Adarius
Darius
Harshaw,
Harshaw. Yep.
But then they had a transfer that got hurt. He was a 3-star wide receiver. It was
Ebony Jackson.
Ebony Jackson. We only got to see it for one game, but it was a heck of a ball game. But they all play into each other, right? They all play together, right? So when your quarterback has a couple of 3-star wide receivers to throw it to, and a 3 ended up being a 4-star running back to hand the ball off to, that's a heck of a dynamic. So I think that's the difference, maybe, is that 2018 Creekview had pieces, 2018 Sequoyah had pieces, 2020 Riverwood had pieces, but it wasn't that they played in the same system, right? There was some on defense, there was some on offense. You had a piece here, a piece there. So I think that's kind of the difference, is that was the offensive line of 2018 Creekview with Nick Penley and John Williams better than what we see from Sequoia's offensive line in terms of stars? Probably, but the middle of that line, no, they weren't better than the interior of Sequoia's offensive line this year. Was Cade Radham as good as he was that season? Is he better than Will Ruzecki? No, no, he's not. So that's kind of what you get into. And then of course I think you could argue all night about whether Brody Rhodes or Colby Martin's a better quarterback. I don't even want to get into it because, if ifs and buts were candies and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. But I do think that at the end of the day, it's something that this Sequoyah team is making as much of an argument as 2014 Etowah did in terms of what they're kind of looking at, instead of getting stuck at the Elite Eight, which we've been stuck at for the last 7-8 years. To your point, now we're kind of like, this could be a team that we're talking about heading to Atlanta, very realistically.
Yeah, it could be, Coop. I just wanted to kind of put a little ear candy out there for the folks listening to switch it up a little bit. So I
Rat poison.
appreciate you putting that rat poison out there, and of course me uh, stirring the pot here as I normally do. You mentioned one thing I'll mention: the similarity between Brody Rhodes and Colby Martin. Both of them will. One has been and one will be, but at some point, both of them will have been student athletes at Georgia Tech. And so good to see, again, either way, good to see our Cherokee County players moving on to the next level and having success. But we're excited that Sequoyah still has 5 more games remaining in their schedule, and including this one on Friday night, and it'll be a good one. Coop, before we talk about it, let's start with Coach Teter. And the rumor has it he's got a couple of friends he brought along. He said he's tired of answering our questions, so he bought someone else for us to talk to this week. Coach Teter is on the phone with Coach Jacqmein and Coach Budde. I think we're ready to bring him in, Coop.
And thank you for joining us on the North Georgia Sports Report podcast. And joining us once again is the head coach for the Sequoyah Chiefs, Coach Teter, and also special guest, offensive coordinator, Coach Ben Jacqmein, and defensive coordinator, Brent Budde. Gentlemen, thank you all for being with us. And Coach Teter, I do want to start with you. Just kind of some overall perspective thoughts before we start breaking down the offense and defense specifically. Obviously, a great win against a very talented Sprayberry team on Friday this past week. Give us your impressions from that game and what you saw from your team overall.
Just thought we played a complete game. I thought both sides, offense, defense, played really well, extremely well. And then I thought we played well on our special teams also. Just a lot of growth in what we've done, but still a lot of areas we need to work on.
My first question is for Coach Jacqmein. Coach, you have one of the most explosive offenses in the state of Georgia, regardless of classification. I think we maybe saw some of this coming, but maybe not to this extent that you guys are putting up points. What's the difference between this year's group and last year's groups, who was pretty explosive in their own right? How did you guys get better in the offseason and up to this point?
Yeah, we returned 9 of 11, so everybody's a year older, a year stronger. And then our quarterback, Colby, dove in with us all off season, and his stats aren't the same this year, but he's twice the player he was last year, making checks at the line. It's very easy to call plays right now. If I'm wrong, he checks me out of it. So he's been unbelievable. And then for us, it's just been having an unselfish mentality. We asked our group, what's your goal? If your goal is to go further than what you did last year, I said, I'll tell you right now, and I told him this in April, you are very good. This will be the last time you hear it from me. We're going to coach the little things and coach the details. And we're going to be really, really hard on you and remind you what your goal is. And they're bought in completely. We had a little scare week 1, and that kind of woke them up a little bit. And since then, the physicality and intensity in practice has been so much better.
Coach Budde, as we've kind of seen your defense grow throughout the year, the one thing that stood out to me is the turnovers, and that continued on Friday. 3 interceptions once again, including Jedediah Marshall with the pick six. That secondary, how have they progressed throughout the year to get to this point where, when we watch a game on Friday, it's, +2, +3 in the turnover margin defensively?
Yeah, luckily for us, we brought back 3 in the secondary with Benji Smith and Brooks Darling, and then Carson Berry. And then we added a kid that transferred in, Asa Goings, who was a good player. So that really solidified us in the secondary. It was still early on about knowing our adjustments and our checks and things like that. But yeah, Jay Marshall, stepped up big for us last week, and we have a strong belief that he's going to be a great player. He has all the physical tools, and we just got to get him, in the right mindset. But yeah, the takeaways, and I think that comes from also not giving up the explosive plays that lead to touchdowns. We keep making them, have to play another play, and sooner or later we're coming away with a takeaway from it. But a lot of that, a lot of the takeaways is pressure up front too from the front 7. So, sometimes those secondary guys are just sitting back there waiting because we got pressure on the quarterback and he just threw it up.
This question, I'll pose it to all three of you, and I'll start with Coach Jacqmein. We saw Matthew Matz catch a pass in this past game, and as I was speaking with Coach Budde earlier, kind of caught the first quarter on Chiefs TV and heard the wonderful play-by-play guys on Chiefs TV, and they said, "Hey, that's Matthew Matz," and I had to kind of rewind it and do a double take, and I said, "Wait a minute here. What kind of horse trading goes on between the three of you guys for particular players?" I know normally we see Matthew Matz along the defensive line, and I know Coach, I don't know if like you had to pay off Coach Dozier over there to make sure that he would get him back, but how does that work for you guys? I know we've seen it with Brooks over the season, but that was an interesting wrinkle, at least from my point of view.
Yeah, he's such a physical kid who played some tight end in our jumbo package last year. And we knew that was a game plan heavy thing. I'm not saying you're not going to see more of them, but the Sprayberry, we knew we'd have to lean on our big guys, and the way they played with the force player, we needed a big body on him. So we moved Maddox Waller to wing and Matthew Matz down to tight end. I mean, he bought in. It's not a fun job what we ask our tight ends to do in our offense all the time, and those two are so unselfish. But with regards to, obviously, Will Rejecki could help us on defense, but for him to be the best version of himself, we need him at running back. The Brooks is the main one. We're trying to figure out how much of each side to keep him healthy for the run throughout the year and all that. But, for us, it's just about being smart, and me and Coach Budde both have to be unselfish when discussing personnel. And I somehow end up being the one to ask for permission quite a bit instead of the other way around.
Brent will say, but there should have been some lunches on that one.
That's a great question. How it goes, Art, is whoever the offense wants, they get. That's how it goes.
Coach Jacqmein says, I just want to follow up with that. I know how old I am, Coach Jacqmein, and I know when you graduated high school, which means I'm older than you, but there's this thing called seniority, and I think that's how it works, but I don't want to speak out of turn here. But as Coach Budde said, I do get this feeling in most programs, the offense kind of overrules the defense here.
Just a little bit.
Well, gentlemen, obviously another big test this week coming up, inter-county rival in River Ridge, our game of the week. The Knights, 4-1 coming into this contest. We'll kind of go through the order. Coach Jacqmein, I'll start with you. From a offensive perspective, what kind of challenges does that Knights defense present for you?
The same thing every year. They're so disciplined. They're so physical, and they're so well coached. Coach Collins and his defensive coordinator over there do such a great job of, they're always lined up right. We obviously throw a lot of eye candy at people with shifts and motions, and they're ready for them. So for us, it's going to be about execution, because they're going to fit the run correctly. They're going to be ready for play action. They're just so well coached. So for us, it's about us being disciplined and doing our jobs. We cannot be sloppy Friday night.
And Coach Budde, from the River Ridge offense perspective, what kind of challenges will that present for your defense?
I think they have two really good running backs, first of all, and they can do a lot of different things with those two, and they have been. So they kind of keep you off balance with their formations and the motions and, the things that they do there. And they got a good quarterback, and they have guys on the outside that can go deep. They showed that last week versus Pope. So when they suck you in on the run to play that, then they go for the shot play over the top. So we got to be disciplined and not give up the explosive plays and make them drive the ball.
And Coach Teter, obviously you and Coach Collins are two of the longest tenured in Cherokee County at this point. Anything in particular that you're telling your team getting ready for this matchup this week?
We just talk a lot about them that, people made such a big deal about last week's game that didn't determine anything as far as what it goes as the region, that they got to keep their eyes open, and everybody in this that still we have to play still has a shot at everything. So they just got to be patient on Friday night, take care of what their responsibility is, what their job is, and then just understand that they want this just as bad as you do. So you have to fight for it. And so we know it's going to be a war. We know it's going to be a heck of a game. It is every year with them. We just hopefully have done enough to get ourselves ready.
Coach, we told you at the top we'd ask you 4 questions, and I, of course, in my magical way, came up with another question that I want to point to Coach Teter. How much better can this team get from your perspective? Are you guys playing at the level that you want, or is there room for improvement?
I always think there's room for improvement. I think we've done some good things. We've done some really good things in certain games, but we still have, you watch film with kids on Monday and you find mistakes that you made and you still got to work on. So I think there's always, and we tell our kids, there's always something that we can improve on. It's our job to figure out what that is and what the drills are going to be and how we're going to attack those things. We just got to get them to go out and perform it.
Well, Coach, you guys have been doing your job as a staff over the first 5 weeks, and we wish you the best of luck as you travel on the road to River Ridge, a rivalry game. Some might call it a trap game, Coop, on Friday night after a big win against Sprayberry, a team that many people thought would be a favorite for the region. So now you guys probably have the biggest target on your back the rest of the season. We thank you all, Coach Teter, Coach Jacqmein, Coach Budde, for joining us here on the North Georgia Sports Report. You guys are always great sports, and we can't wait to have y'all back. If Coach Teter will allow it, we'd love to get you guys back on the podcast later on in the season.
Anytime.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
And thank you to all 3 gentlemen for joining us. Again, we always like to get an inside look at the individual coaches, a little bit of coordinator action going on. So always great to see Coach Jacqmein for the first time this year. And then obviously Coach Budde joining us again, and Coach Teter as well. But a lot of fun to have all those guys. They seem like a coaching staff that really enjoy being around each other.
Absolutely do, Coop. A lot of good insight. I think it's kind of funny how offense trumps defense. Coach Teter even kind of overriding that. We know he's an offensive guy, and I almost feel sorry for Coach Budde, kind of outnumbered there. We'll have to see if we can get somebody else from the defensive staff on the podcast here at some point down the line.
I'm about to say we'll have to start like a GoFundMe for Budde to get some of his players back. It sounds like.
I tell you what, Jacqmein's holding them hostage, and you know what? They're scoring points, so they know what they're doing. They're scoring points, and then the defense is defending. So all around great effort there by Sequoyah. Coop, before we break the game down, we've also got Coach Collins in here, and one of these days we're just going to get all these coaches in at the same time and let them talk ball and kind of hopefully get the community to see kind of a little bit maybe lighter side. But we were excited to have Coach Teter and his staff. Now we have Coach Collins, I believe, on the line, ready to join us to talk about his River Ridge Knights, their game last week, and of course their upcoming opponent this week.
And thank you for joining us on the North Georgia Sports Report podcast. Once again, joining us is the head coach of the River Ridge Knights, Coach Mike Collins. Coach, thank you for being back with us.
Thanks for having me, Will. Always great to be here, brother.
Absolutely, Coach. We always look forward to it. Want to talk about last week with you. A nice win over Pope, kind of rebounding from that heartbreaker over there in Town Lake. Give us a little bit about what you saw from your team, during the week, but also in the game on Friday, and how they responded from that, and how you guys were able to come away with a pretty decisive win on Friday.
Well, I think early in the week there were some understandable bumps and bruises and some hurdles to get over, but they kind of regathered themselves and had a really good week of practice towards the latter part of the week. And I think we're eager to try to bounce back and get on the win column. And then went into the game on Friday, and we were just excited to get our run game back going. I think we kind of took that personal after being kind of shut down a little bit versus Woodstock. So both backs got going pretty good and finally got Lockerman off, two on the ground. So offensive line had a great night, and we were able to avoid the big play. Pope's got a really good quarterback, so we knew that would be a key to victory. And so we were able to kind of contain him and come away with the victory. Pretty excited about it.
Coach, in your preparation for this past week, one of the things we look at is a heartbreaking loss the week before to a county rival. How do you avoid kind of a letdown? And like, we kind of look at sometimes these games are trap games. We were kind of looking at the score updates, and you said it looks like your guys were eager to get going. What was it in practice, or is this team do you just have is it senior leadership? Is it coaching? Is it a mix? What kind of allows you to rebound from a loss like that and then go out and get right back to where you guys started from and dominating on the ground?
No, that's a great question. I would love to say it's coaching, but I can't say that. It's our seniors. We have a great group of guys that have been around for a long time that we've been trying to instill in them that there's no play more important than the next play, no game more important than the next game. Whether you win the one in the past or lose, have a setback, the next one's the most important one. And I think just fortunate enough to be able to lean on them, and then they kind of led the way throughout the week. Again, our offensive line, I think, took some pride in. We got to get our backs back going, and so it was all about senior leadership and junior leadership, and just taking some pride and being eager to get back out there. And again, back to one drill at a time and trying to win the day. And they just went out and did. I was so proud of them Friday, just bounced back the way they did.
Coach, one of the things that I've really tried to look at this year is efficiency for what, yards per carry, yards per completion, that kind of thing. I don't know that I've ever seen such interesting numbers from a guy in Arden Redmond who had 3 grabs for 136 yards and 2 touchdowns. Maybe the pinnacle of efficiency that I've ever seen in a box score. Can you tell us about that? Is that something that you may have seen coming, or is that a number that even surprised you and your staff?
Well, I like that number because that means, again, I think it goes back to being able to establish the run. I think he should probably take the offensive line and the running backs out to dinner because I think when you're able to run the ball and guys have to start committing to that and they have to start getting guys in the box and maybe you can create some dirty eyes in the secondary. And I think that's what happened. I think there were a lot of people trying to commit down to Cam Cox and Michael Pugh, and next thing you know, we hit a couple play actions over the top, and he's talented enough to take advantage of that. If you're not very disciplined back there, so that's what happens. And I didn't foresee. I'm going to say I foresee it, but I think it's a part of what we're trying to do, what we're trying to accomplish as far as throwing the ball off the run more this year. And when you can do that, when you can establish that, you have a chance to make big plays.
Coach, you guys face another region rival, another county rival this week, just from right down the road on East Cherokee Drive.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of teams, and I'll let Will ask you in terms of the keys to the game, but as you turn on the film, and you've coached a lot of football also, how good is this team in relation to teams that you've coached against, whether regardless of classification, whether you're at Wheeler, Chamblee, River Ridge, and your other stops? How does this team rank to you, the team that you're facing on Friday night?
Right up there at the top. I'll be honest with you. I think that they're really close, maybe a player or two away, or just a little bit, just one more step, and I would be surprised to see them have an opportunity to win it all. I think they're that good. I think they're that solid in everything that they do. I call them the Hickory Flat Mafia because they're leaving bodies all over the place everywhere they go. It's crazy. It's crazy. So, yeah, they're as good as team. They can do a lot of things to you: run the ball, throw the ball. They have a quarterback that's experienced. So I think this is a team that with a break or two, they could be in the mix all the way up to the end. They're really good.
So, Hang on one second, Coop, if I may. I know you've said all those nice things, but I imagine that the River Ridge Knights are still going to show up and play a football game on Friday night,
We're gonna
right?
be there. We're gonna be there.
Okay, just making sure. Just making sure.
Yeah,
Go
we'll
ahead,
be
Coop.
there.
I apologize.
You're good. Well, first of all, thank you for the nickname, because that's the Hickory Flat Mafia. I'm sure that will end up on a sign that you'll see on Friday. I'm sure the student section will enjoy that. But as Art kind of alluded to, keys to the game for you guys, obviously, running the ball has been your identity, but the passing efficiency is picked up. But from your perspective, what's it going to take to be successful on Friday against Sequoyah?
We need to try to get them off schedule offensively. That's when they're really clicking. When they're on schedule, they're tough to it's tough to get off the field defensively for you. So we try to get them off schedule if we can some kind of way, and they're really good on third and longs too. So once you get them to that situation, you gotta come up with some kind of plan that can hopefully get you off the field. And then on the other side of it, we need to stay on schedule ourselves. That'll help us a lot if we're not behind the chains. We can stay in front of it. Maybe establish the run game and be able to do some things off of the run, take care of the football. And we need special teams play. We need something big to happen in special teams, and maybe have an opportunity to get going early. I think it'll be a 4-quarter game, hopefully, and be fun. We'll see what happens.
Well, Coach, you guys, again, as we mentioned, you host Sequoyah this week, and if I'm not mistaken, did you guys have any special teams blocks last week?
And 2 of them.
Two of them. Okay, so kind of right on schedule. So you're due for two more this week against Sequoyah, and maybe you and the folks in Night Nation again can put my face on a blocking dummy next week as if I happen to pick against the Night and Night Nation, but that remains to be seen. Coop, we'll talk about that later in the podcast. But Coach Collins, man, I tell you what, I'm actually going to be out of town, so I won't be able to be down at the Ridge this week.
You're going to miss a good game, Art.
I feel like this might be one of the best games in this rivalry. I know there's a couple times before River Ridge really got going that Night Nation had come out and was packed out. But I feel like, Coop, this is going to be one of the best games in this rivalry, and certainly one of the best games on Friday night. So, Coach Collins, we do wish you the best of luck on Friday, and we will certainly be talking to you later on in this football season.
I really appreciate it, guys. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much. And as always, thanks for what you do for River Ridge football. Go Knights.
And again, thank you to Coach Collins for being with us on the podcast. Once again, always look forward to talking to Coach Collins, man. Brightens my day.
Yes, he's all energy and laughter. And I'll say this, before we went on the air, we tried to get Coach Collins to join in on a conversation you and I were having that had nothing to do with Sequoyah or River Ridge, and he was like, "Nah, you're not gonna do that to me. You're not gonna fool me, guys." And
it wasn't even a region conversation.
But again, always serious business. But we appreciate him being lighthearted enough to take some time out of his day to speak with us about the Knights, and really enjoyed that conversation with Coach Collins. Coop, anything that stood out in our interviews today regarding this matchup to you?
I don't know that anything stands out in particular. I think the thing that hearing both coaches, or all 4 coaches, I will say, but both staffs, represented here. I think the thing that stands out to me is the amount of respect they have for each other and the programs that they've built. Just because Sequoyah is having a historic run really over the last 3 years, 4 years, that doesn't take away from what River Ridge has built either. And I think, when we talk to Coach Teter and we talk to Coach Collins, that respect is back and forth, and we love to see that, man. I mean, I know Sequoyah and River Ridge is a rivalry game. I know that we've kind of heard some of the backstories about why these teams don't necessarily love each other, but as far as the coaching staffs go, it's all love and a lot of respect, so that's always good to see.
Yeah, absolutely, Coop. I couldn't agree more. When you size these teams up, you talked about the success they've had over the last 5-6 years. These have been the 2 most consistent programs in the county in terms of reaching the postseason, and along with 2 coaches, both, as you mentioned, longest tenured, but both coaches with over 100 career wins on their resume. So these guys have been doing it for a while, and they know what they're doing, and have their teams playing at a high level. Coop, let's talk about this ball game. River Ridge coming in here, it's got to be in most people's book an underdog, because no one has figured out how to stop the Hickory Flat Mafia, as Coach Collins so eloquently put that in our last interview. Thoughts on this ball game?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I've tried a lot of different ways to make it work for River Ridge. I've tried to think about some of the ways that the Knights can win this. It's not unwinnable if things go your way, but it requires Sequoyah to make mistakes. I think that's going to be the key. River Ridge is going to have to force some special teams, which Coach Collins mentioned. I think we all agree with that. That's the one place that River Ridge has excelled week in, week out. The one game they didn't was against Woodstock, and they weren't able to turn that into a win. So I think that's key number one. Key number two is going to be keeping the offensive efficiency for River Ridge. They're going to have to be efficient on offense. Now, again, I don't expect you to average 40 yards per completion. I don't expect you to average 50 yards per reception. I'm not saying that, but it is going to have to be an efficient game. The big question for me is River Ridge got shut down in the running game by Woodstock. Sequoyah has not faced a running team like River Ridge yet, to be honest. They've kind of faced more of these spread teams in Kell and in Sprayberry, even Cherokee, for example, that really hadn't found their footing in the running game at that point in that game. So this is going to be a little different style. I don't know that it's easier to defend necessarily. It's going to be that's going to be the question mark for me. And then River Ridge defensively, can they cover the second and third option? Right. Will Rzecki's going to get his, but you can't let him get 7 touchdowns. Right. So that's kind of the metric. If he gets 2, live with it. But the key is to cover guys like Jack Ripley, Brooks Darling, even if they flare out guys like Maddox Waller, Matthew Matz that we saw last week against Sprayberry, make sure you cover those third and fourth options in the route, because Colby Martin has learned how to hit those and efficiently. So that's going to be the key to this game, is that River Ridge defense looks really solid. I think it's one of the most underrated groups that we've talked about, is that River Ridge defense that's putting together a really good season so far. I think the magic number in this one for the Knights is probably 24. I think if Sequoyah gets past that 24-point mark, I don't know that River Ridge can score and keep up with that. I certainly hope so. I thought that they did a good job against Pope putting up some of those numbers. But if you look at what Pope has done this year, they lost 56-0 to Johns Creek. It's just like it's like, okay, you put up 44 against Pope, like, yeah, that's great, but hopefully it carries over. So I'm going to put it at 24 would be the magic number for the Knights, and I will wait to give my prediction until after you go.
All right, I will go now. Coop, a couple of keys to the game for me. I think this is probably goes without saying. If you're River Ridge, you really want to establish that run game early. You've got to feed Sequoyah a steady dose of Cam Cox and Micah Pugh to help control the tempo and maybe have some sustaining time, bleeding drives, and almost kind of what Sequoyah likes to do. You almost have to take a page out of their playbook, and these teams play, at least in the run game, so similarly in their reliance on it. So you got to imagine both teams are going to do that. Coach Collins mentioned, I believe he said dirty eyes, kind of looking in the backfield. Maybe play action, it will come up big for River Ridge. I think they've got to get to third down and manageable, and that goes along with sustaining drives. And then two things, defensively or offensively. One thing, you can't turn the ball over. The Chiefs have forced 14 turnovers. We talked about their 3 interceptions last week. They've got 9 on the season. Darling has 3. Benji Smith has 2 to lead that secondary. You've got to protect the ball if you're locker room. And we know they're not going to throw the ball out there. You talked about the efficiency. He's 6 for 9 last week. And then last but not least, on defense for River Ridge, it's limit explosive plays from Rzecki. It's easy to write and easy to say, hard to do. But Coach Collins and his staff will certainly have their work cut out in limiting that. On the other hand, if you're Sequoyah, you're going to just do the opposite. You're going to ride Rzecki. He's been a workhorse for them all season. Perhaps he continues and wears down the Knights defense, and that might, again, set up a chance for that play action pass for Sequoyah, who's probably not going to throw the ball a whole lot on Friday night. I think getting off to a fast start is key to Sequoyah. This we talked about this a little bit, I think, off air. But whether or not this might be a trap game for the Chiefs, but I think if you get off to a fast start, you kind of lay all that to rest early on. Keep winning in the turnover margin. I think that's one thing that's been a hallmark for Coach Budde and his defense this season. We didn't really talk to him a whole lot when we had him on, but his defense has been solid in turning teams over. And then ultimately, speaking with defense, if you control the line of scrimmage and stop Pugh and Cox, I think the rest kind of takes care of itself, regardless of what kind of start the offense gets off to. I just think there's, Sequoyah is probably playing a little bit higher level. They're a little bit, in my opinion, more proven in their results this season, and I think they go on the road and get a win. I don't think it's a blowout. I just don't think that River Ridge can keep up with Sequoyah. I like the Chiefs by 16, maybe 36-20, something around that number right there.
Yeah, so I agree with all your points. I don't see how Riveridge scores 20 in this game. I kind of look back at
You want me to tell you how they score 20?
give it to me.
Okay. Cam Cox, 22-yard touchdown run.
Well,
Hunter
you're calling your
Lockerman.
shots here.
Yeah, I am. Hunter Lockerman, 47-yard pass, touchdown pass to Arden Redmond. Extra point, no good. And then Cam Cox on a 36-yard touchdown run. And that's it, 36-20.
If those end up being true, we're going to investigate you for something. I don't know what. But like I said, I've already had to file some reports with the sheriff's office for what Sequoyah's been doing to teams. So you'll be next, man. I'm telling you better watch out. But
go ahead, Coop. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, I like it. Hey, calling your shot, man. It's like Babe Ruth pointing out the home run before he hits it, man. I tell you. But no, look, Sequoyah has defensively, to your point, shut down teams that we didn't think they could. They shut down Cal. They shut down Cherokee. And yes, Sprayberry scored 20, but a couple of those were in trash time.
Right.
River Ridge has not won a game doing that. Their games that they've won have been nail biters and grinding it out. Again, Denmark 17-14, Cherokee 28-23, Allatoona, I don't have it in front of me, but 14-13, 14-10, something like that. They lost to Woods by only scoring 10. I don't know how they can get to 20 against the Sequoyah defense would be my thing. I don't know if I'll call for the shutout, but I do think Sequoyah wins this one by 4 or 5 touchdowns, to be honest. I mean,
okay.
I don't see it as a trap game, and here's why. I think that the fact that, yes, obviously last week is kind of what we as pundits called the pinnacle, de facto region title game, all of this stuff. But the fact that they're going on the road to a county rival, I think really helps. I think that helps a ton. And this is a River Ridge team that, you can turn over the page and say they've made the playoffs for the last 5 years as well. So it's not a team that you can just skip over. They're a playoff competitive team. So with that being said, I don't think Sequoyah is going to be lulled to sleep. I think they will come out ready to play. Again, if River Ridge is going to win this game, it has to be in special teams and off to a fast start. I just don't know that it's enough. Like I said, I think Sequoyah really wins this by about 35 points.
All right. The good news is, Coop, that River Ridge will be on spring break or fall break next week, and so maybe they'll conveniently forget what you said about them.
I doubt it.
Or maybe if they shock us and the world or the state, rather than your face will appear along my face on their tackling sleds this week.
Probably. I've avoided it so far, which is rare for me, for any team.
Oh, playing it close to the vest, Coop. Not this week, though, I see. All right, those are our previews for week 6. Coop, let's talk a little power rankings here. I've got a small shuffle in mind, but I can't remember who went first last week. I feel like it's been so long since we recorded. But I'm going to play the home team this week, and I'm going to let you go first, and then we'll just go ping pong and back and forth till we get to number 1.
Yeah, I have one small shift in mine as well, and it is at the bottom. It's with number 6, and that is Cherokee, who drops a spot for me. Creekview's won 2 games in a row, so I think I had to move them up. Cherokee's defense is just giving me a lot of pause for continuing to keep them above another team, so Cherokee's gonna be my 6.
Yeah, I'm with you right there, Coop. I've got Cherokee at 6, and then that gives me Creekview at 5. To all the points that you mentioned, I think both of our bottom two are exactly the same. Creekview 5, Cherokee 6.
Yeah, I got Creekview at 5 too. Again, you win 2 games. Don't really care who it's against. It's impressive performances. Again, 35-7 win against anybody looks pretty good. Creekview continues to move in the right direction. They can make a lot of headway this week if they beat Woodstock, but yeah, they look good to me right now. So no movement there.
All right, at number 4, I have River Ridge, Coop. Still a good win over Pope, but I have a long memory sometimes, and my long memory remembers their game 2 weeks ago against Woodstock. But I've got the Knights at number 4. I think there's a jumble for me at 2, 3, 4, where these teams you can kind of put them in a jar and shake them up and roll them out, and anyone that comes out, or stick your hand in there and pick one out. But right now, I got River Ridge playing some pretty good football at number 4.
Yeah, so for my 4 is still Etowah. They were idle, and the 3 teams above them won their games. Not really anything to move them on. If they do beat Marietta, that'll be a pretty compelling argument because we know either Sequoyah or Riveridge is going to lose, and we also know either Woodstock or Creekview is going to lose. So, depending on how those games play out, and depending how Etowah's performance is, they could certainly move up in mine. But again, nothing happened this week that I can move them up or down, so they stay at 4.
Fair enough. And how about number 3 for you this week, Coop?
Yeah, I got the Knights at number 3. A good win against, again, Pope. They put up the offensive numbers that we've been waiting to see all year. Defense played a really solid game. But again, the 2 teams above them also won their games. So I just don't see any reason to move them up or down right now.
All right. I have Woodstock at number 3, as I did last week, winning over Lassiter. I think they continue to win. And they're behind a team, in my opinion, two teams, one that beat them on the field and one that will probably be favored when they do play. But I think Woodstock did well to bounce back and win the game against Lassiter. I don't think style points necessarily matter, especially if you ask these head coaches. They're about getting W's, and especially in region play. But again, like River Ridge, I think Woodstock is playing pretty good ball, and I don't think we've seen the best from Woodstock either, Coop. In my opinion, in my poll, I think they're the team that has the most to move up to. Of course, when I have them at number 3, that's probably why. But I think they have the team that they're the team that can make the most improvement in my mind in this second half of the season.
Yeah, Woodstock's still at my number 2 for that exact reason. Again, they beat River Ridge the week before, and then they avoided the trap game. Again, I felt like it was going to be, and I know it was close, probably closer than a lot of people thought, us included. So they did what they needed to do. I think that might be motivation is kind of like a scare
Mm-hmm.
that they will use moving forward. So yeah, I keep Woodstock at my number 2.
All right. And at my number 2, I have Etowah still, even though they were off. I did not penalize them for the bye week. Pretty good win over Chapel Hill. But like you mentioned, this week, I think we'll learn more about the Eagles. Are they a pretender or contender? And again, I know this is just 1 week in region play, but Marietta, a team that historically has had the number of the Eagles, they'll have an opportunity to make a statement in region 5, 6A. Will the Etowah Eagles, I have them as number 2, which leaves the surprise of the year at number 1 this week again for like I don't know, 39th consecutive week or whatever, however long we've been having this podcast and talking about top teams, Sequoyah at the top.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think if anything else, I probably entered a couple extra spaces to separate 2 through 6 and then put 1 up higher. I mean, it was an impressive win for them. I mean, nobody else in the county nor in the area arguably, nor in the state has as impressive of a win as they did last week. So, if you're top 5 in your classification, that's pretty tough to say they can be anywhere but number 1. So, to your point, for the 39th week in a row, it is Sequoyah still.
There we have it. Coop, kind of looking across games across the state, this is almost kind of a slim week in terms of top matchups around. But I did want to just briefly mention uh, North Paulding and North Cobb will be facing off on Friday night. And we will talk about a little bit more about this next week as a lot of our teams are on the bye, but an interesting matchup there. North, both of those teams, really relying on the run. Should be an interesting game in terms of region standings. And, I'm curious to see as we, reach the halfway point of the season. I'll just to tease us a little bit, I want to make sure that you are taking a look at our regions, and we'll see what we think about region standings next week and where our teams might fall if we can prognosticate a little bit on that.
Yeah, we will next week. I think we'll get a much clearer picture, especially for our friends in 6A after a couple of results. Etowah will have one, but everybody else will have a couple. That'll help a ton. And then, yeah, I mean, I think for region or in 5A right now, our region 6, it's kind of a jumbled up mess. Because Sprayberry is going to be at 1-1. You got a team like Riverwood that's at 1-1. You've got a team like Woodstock that's 2-0. You got Sequoyah at 2-0. You got Creekview at 2-0. We kind of talk about it if they play tomorrow, when you're talking about kind of punching your ticket into the playoffs. I mean, that Creekview Woodstock game is a heck of a ball game to watch because that's going to be key for those teams to make the playoffs. I think Woodstock's probably in the catbird seat for making the playoff with their win over Riverwood because I think Riverwood will kind of separate themselves as they get further past the Sequoyah game. Sprayberry is a question, right? Because, what's going to be interesting is if Sequoyah gets into a game, to your point, if they play a team like Riverwood this week and they win by 13, then we're all going to do the transitive property of saying, well, they beat Sprayberry by 43. So how much, and we're going to be sitting here next week scratching our head about who is where and how good one team is or not. So it's kind of a jumbled up mess. And I think we'll get some clarity with it, really getting an idea of how separate Sequoyah is, if they are from River Ridge, and also Creekview and Woodstock kind of getting an idea of where they are in the pecking order. Because whoever's the winner of that game is going to be 3-0. And I would say the schedule favors Woodstock a little bit more because they're still going to get to play Pope and also Riverwood, which obviously Creekview's already played Riverwood. So in terms of strength of schedule remaining, Woodstock has a little bit more of a better seat than Creekview does. But all of that being said, regardless, there's a potential that we could have a bunch of 2-1 teams here this week that'll make for a nightmare for us to break down and try and figure out who has to win what for which team to get, first through 4.
Yeah, at that point, as we get later in the season and closer toward that second bye week, we'll likely be reaching out to a few of our region 6-5A coaches to get the tiebreak formula here, because I think that's going to come into play, as you mentioned, Coop, at somewhere down the line, as these teams continue to compete in the 2025 season. Coop, I know you weren't able to make it to a Texas ball game last week. Any updates on Friday Night Lights on Preston? I know you were here in Georgia, but any updates to Texas ball this week?
Yeah, we skipped last week. Obviously had to fly out short notice. Normally record them the day after you and I record, and was on a flight to Atlanta instead of doing that. So we skipped the podcast last week. We may skip it again this week. Schedule's kind of loaded, kind of getting in town on a short, week since I flew in this morning. But in terms of results, Salina and Gunner played. Those were two defending state champs. Salina won that game pretty handily, 44-12, I believe was the final. That was a good win for the Bobcats since they had been kind of up in the air about how good they were going to be compared to last year, which it's hard to match a 16-0 record year over
Yeah.
year. But they looked good. Obviously, the rain shortened 2 weeks ago, so that also added another element of we don't know what the heck's going on here. But this week, there's a couple of really good matchups. Prosper is going to play McKinney, which that'll be at McKinney, and that is the stadium where the Division III national championship is played. So it's a heck of a facility. Not that Prosper is not used to a heck of a facility since they play at Children's Health Stadium just down the road from us, but that'll be a good game. That's starting region play for the 6A teams. And then Salina is going to be taking on Franklin, which is another 4A team for them. Franklin is not a state power by any stretch of the imagination. But regardless, Salina gets their first true home game of the year. So we're excited to be out at Bobcat Field this week to watch finally. After we're here in week 4 now, we'll get to watch a real home game. Hopefully, there is no weather pending on Friday night, from what I've seen. So if we can avoid the travesty of 2 weeks ago, that would be great. But yeah, that's what's going on with us. So probably no podcast this week, just to keep things simple and organized. But we'll be out of the game on Friday night, and excited to kind of report back what happens this week when we're more in the swing of it.
Very well, Coop. I tell you what, I will not be at a game this week, so it'll be a chance for you to try to top the North Murray Mountaineers pulled pork sandwich that I had. Pretty solid. I won't say it's the best pulled pork I've ever eaten in my life, but for a high school football game, I thought it was pretty good. Not as moist as I would want it to, so I'm going to go with 3.5 stars out of 5. If anyone can see in the background, I've got beautiful Fort Mountain in my background tonight, as our good friend Dave Garner and I were along with Jackson Wright on the call last week to watch North Murray and Coop. I'm gonna North Murray, the home of Lad McConkey,
Mountaineers.
the Mountaineers. They've got another kind of player in his same mold. I don't know if he'll reach the same heights as Ladd did, but Hudson Hewlett, quarterback at North Murray, put on a show, was responsible for 5 touchdowns, 3 through the air, 2 on the ground, if I'm not mistaken, and also picked off a pass in the secondary. And they also split him out at wide receiver, and he's a fantastic athlete. In Class 2A, I know we don't talk a whole lot of things outside of Cherokee County out in Texas here, but very good to kind of get out and see a little bit different brand of ball up in the mountains and get a hint of fall weather, because I know that we're right back in the 80s, the upper 80s this week, and it's a little bit miserable, but the cooler fall weather is coming. And as that, I know it's so cliche, Coop, but as those weathers drop, the action's going to heat up and our region standings will heat up. So please come back and join us next week as we talk region standings in Region 6 5A and in Region 5 6A for you next week. We appreciate everyone joining you as always. Our thanks to Coach Collins, Coach Budde, Coach Teter, and Coach Jacqmein specifically. And of course, our thanks to our fans, our listeners who continue to download, upload, share, comment, good or bad. We've got thick skin. We can take it. We love the feedback, and we just hope that we're providing the best coverage we can for the student athletes here in Cherokee County. And with that said,
partner.
And with that said, Coop, we will see everyone next week. We hope you have a safe weekend and enjoyable spring break. If you're on the road, get home safely, and let's get back at it next week.